here for the day. I'll make some introductions here. Start with Michael Lujan. Michael Lujan is our immediate past president of CAHU. Thank you very much for that. He's a current board member on SVAHU as well. Thank you very much for that. Works for Limelight, and prior to Limelight, Michael was one of the founding executives that covered California. He was the director of sales for Blue Shield of California and a broker and general agent for 15 years. Michael is an outspoken advocate for the broker distribution channel, small business, and the uninsured. He currently serves as the Chief Strategy Officer at Limelight Health, an employee benefits quoting engine based here in San Francisco. Michael will be our moderator today. Thank you, Michael. Come on up. Oh, I won't. And our guest speaker today is David Sachs. David is the CEO of Zenefits. He's an internet entrepreneur who was the founding CEO of Yammer, an original COO and product leader of PayPal, and member of the PayPal Mafia. Sounds fierce. A group of founders and early employees of PayPal who went on to found a series of other successful technology companies like Yelp, Yammer, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Tesla. David also produced the award-winning independent film, Thank You for Smoking. He is an angel investor in tech companies like Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, House, SpaceX, and Palantir. Please welcome our guest, David Sachs. I'll throw it over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, John, for staying on script. It usually gives me a much different introduction, so thank you for that. Welcome, everyone, to a speaker series that really started here in this room about a year and a half ago with Parker Conrad, who was then Zenefits CEO. We're grateful to have David join us today to help sort of update the story and in many ways change the narrative. I think there's a lot of discussion around what happened a year ago, or maybe not so long ago, but still is in the past. So I think this is a great opportunity to have David share an update, talk a little bit about those things, and maybe more importantly, talk about what's in the future. So please join me again in welcoming David Sachs. So I'm not sure if this is a familiar homecoming. I know PayPal has its early roots here at Plug and Play. Is this coming home, or?
It did ring a bell, but PayPal was close to 20 years ago. So, but yeah.
Is the moniker PayPal Mafia one that you accept, embrace, or does it make you cringe a little bit?
Well, obviously it's not literally a mafia, but I think we embrace it in the sense that it was a really great group of early employees at PayPal, and we still stay in touch. And the group's gone on to do a lot of great things in Silicon Valley. So yeah.
I think a major understatement. I think in VC terms, to say that you're an entrepreneurial star, I think that would be like saying LeBron James is a pretty good basketball player. So appreciate the modesty. To put a number to it, I don't know if it was shared in the introduction. He's had a couple of successful startups that were sold, including Yammer, which was sold to Microsoft for $1.2 billion, billion with a B. So your work with Zenefits now is sort of a return to things you've already done. You've already worked with massively large-scale operations. What first brought you to Zenefits?
Well, I thought the idea for the company was really terrific. Zenefits is trying to bring an all-in-one HR solution to small businesses, and that includes the benefits piece of it, but it's not limited to that. And this is a market that every small business needs an HR system.
6 million of them.
Exactly, there's millions of them, and in the enterprise, you've got Workday, which is kind of the dominant player, but in the sort of under 1,000 employees space, it starts to become very fragmented, and I just thought it was a great idea to try and provide this sort of solution to small businesses, and I think the thing that resonated for me was this idea of making life easier for entrepreneurs. That small business owners, entrepreneurs, they have a growing list of HR requirements that they have to comply with, and just helping them do that and letting them focus on whatever the dream was that caused them to create their company in the first place. I think that mission resonated with me as well.
And I think a lot of us can probably relate to that as, benefits brokers that serve clients in this beltway of technology and startups. I think that's something we can all relate to. And frankly, what I thought was most genuine about Parker's reasons for and maybe the genesis of the company, but a lot's changed over the past year and a half. We'll get into some of the juicier stuff to a minimum, or I don't know.
Well, whatever you want to ask is okay with me. So.
And I should share, I invited David. In the past interview, Parker asked us to speak, and I think he had a different motive. I think when Parker Conrad came to speak to our group a year and a half ago, he had the specific motive of recruiting, figuring on this stage he could speak to a room full of brokers like are assembled here. A lot of you were there last time. That some of them would actually throw their card in a basket and maybe work for them. But this is different. So this is us asking you to come and speak, so we're grateful for that. I will ask a few questions that aren't for the sake of being controversial or whatever, but I think I want to ask some questions that I think the room is thinking about. And maybe with that,
yeah, I mean, go for it. And obviously, I mean, so one thing I can kind of say already is that I do feel like the company's relationship with the broker community has been needlessly adversarial in the past. And I don't think there's a good reason for that. I think there's a lot of room in this market for different approaches. And I'm personally lactose intolerant. I don't drink milkshakes. So
well played. I was wondering which one of us would bring that up first. Well, and so to that end, and again, on this stage, ask Parker. So to put that in context, at TechCrunch Disrupt, I think in New York, 2012? Right. Somewhere around there. This was an early stage, 3 employees, pre-funded startup. I think most of their capital was invested in the gold T-shirts at the time. So I think it was a much different statement at the time to say, make an audacious statement. If you're a professional, a traditional broker in the benefits area and working in HR, that we're going to mess things up and we're going to do 10 times as much as your traditional broker does. But that was said in the context of, I'm trying to pitch to raise money. I'm trying to get a company funded. So he had, and maybe whispered it, took it back, I guess, or at least explained it. Anything you want to share in terms of that adversarial start and maybe your opportunity to take it back? If
yeah, I mean, so like I said, I think that approach it's been sort of needlessly adversarial. I think that, like I said, I think there's a lot of room in the market for different approaches, and and I'm actually intrigued by the idea of potentially working with brokers. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, is there a way for brokers to work with Zenefits? In the past, the answer to that's been no, but I'm actually pretty intrigued by that idea, and I'm not here today to announce anything because we haven't figured it out, but I mean, I'd actually be very curious to hear what you guys have to say about that. And actually, I'm curious, how many of you, if Zenefits had a way for you to participate on our platform, would potentially be interested in that? Okay, so it's like a handful of hands.
About what you expected, or?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. So yeah,
no.
yeah, it wasn't
so
no.
So
that's interesting. Okay.
And I think that's fair, because I think maybe it might be helpful to ask that question at the end of our interview again and see if anything changes in the course of that. So, talking about some of the ways that Zenefits started and some of the statements that Parker made that sort of defined who Zenefits was in the marketplace, where do you all disagree? And I think there's been a number of things in BuzzFeed and Bloomberg and a number of articles that talked about the many ways and differences that you might have had in terms of leadership styles, if not actual strategy. Right.
Well, the most important thing that we had to do when I took over as CEO was bring the company into compliance. And In hindsight, the company clearly under-prioritized licensing compliance and all the issues around that. And so the thing that we've done since I took over was to immediately fix that. We brought the company into compliance. We have today roughly 10,000 licenses to sell insurance. You can see them all. They're all posted on our website if you go to www.zenefits.com/licenses, we actually have a very, very lengthy directory of them, listing each agent, their state, the lines of coverage they're licensed for. And all of that is powered by a technology that we built that we're actually open sourcing to the whole broker community. So
this is on the Salesforce.
Exactly, yeah. So we built an app on top of Salesforce. It's called Licensing Plus. And what it does is it makes sure that so you have to be using Salesforce as your CRM system, but if you install the app, it'll make sure that all of your brokers are licensed to sell in the appropriate territories. For instance, it would prevent an account from being assigned to an agent who wasn't licensed in the appropriate state. And it integrates with Nipper in real time to make sure that all the licensing information is up to date. So this was a big technology effort that the company, that we invested in to get our licensing to be right. And I think certainly for other participants in the market who are interested in operating a national operation, I think it's quite helpful. I think for us, this could have been a moat around the business, and instead we kind of feel like we're lowering the drawbridge by letting any competitor use it. We're open sourcing it, and we're going to be demoing it at Dreamforce, which is Salesforce's big convention, in about 3 weeks.
There is a video out there where people can actually see. I've watched it to see mechanically how it works and all the different. It's actually a pretty quick tutorial or a video if you want to take a look at it. But this was created in response and maybe part of your self-remediation. So Zenefits got into trouble in 6 or 7 states, roughly, or?
Well, so the licensing was a problem in a bunch of states, and what we did is we actually hired an outside auditor to come in, do an audit. They looked at our transactions in every state, and then we proactively self-reported the issue to every state. And so now we're in a process of resolving this with the states. Like I said, Zenefits today is in compliance. The only question is what the regulators want to do about our historical issues. And we already have resolutions with 6 states, and I expect a number more to follow.
So just to clarify, and many companies that, and they do, Airbnb's gotten into trouble, Uber's gotten into trouble. You're not alone in that. As regulation and compliance go, there's lots of ways for a fast-growing startup to get in trouble. Right. You get extra points for self-reporting, telling on yourself? Well,
I just think it's the right thing to do. When you discover you have a problem like this, you need to report it and remediate it. And so that's what we've done. It is interesting, though, that, like you said, I can think of a lot of startups that have had regulatory issues, even great companies like Uber or Airbnb, but we're the only one I can think of that's actually been praised by regulators for our response to what happened. And so, for example, Tennessee's insurance commissioner recently praised the new management of the company for righting the ship, her words. So it has been good we've had these problems, but it's also been nice to get some recognition from regulators that we've cleaned them up, we fixed them, and we're moving forward.
And I think that'll prove to be a smart move overall. That probably goes without saying. And the fines thus far, I think, for 6 states have been a total of about 300,000. Is that
right? That's right.
I think maybe the one that I remember most recent, Kentucky was 60,000 or something like that.
There's.
I don't mean to do.
Yeah. So they're all kind of in that range so far. Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, there's cards, 4x6 index cards that we're passing around. If anyone has questions that they'd like to ask, we'll save those for later on in case there's things we don't cover. So Linnea is walking around in the blue dress with a handful of cards. If you have any questions, please pass them up. And macro. So there was, and I think maybe the most egregious part of this, or the part that probably got the most attention, at least here in California, was the use of a system called Macro. I think it's a plugin, a Google plugin, that allowed users to sort of circumvent the 52 hours of pre-licensing. As all of us know, in order to keep your license or get licensed, there's a pre-licensing requirement, and this was a system that kind of automated it to give the appearance that you're running the 52 hours when you're not really doing it. Is that the gist of it?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. And I only mention that just to get a better understanding of what the remediation process is and what the new software, the compliance software, does to make sure that what's happening in terms of making sure people are properly licensed.
Well, so I agree with you that the macro was worse in the sense that there was more intentionality to it. I think it's a lot worse to intentionally break the rules than to break them as a result of sloppiness or the fact that the company's growing too fast and didn't have all the right processes set up. And so when the company found out about the existence of this software program, we hired a firm to come in and investigate it. They found out that Parker was involved, and then that very quickly precipitated the actions that the company's taken. We escalated to the board of directors. Parker left the company, and we reported that situation to the regulators. And since then, we've actually we've published the report on exactly what happened. It's on our website. You can go read exactly what happened. So we've just been as transparent and forthright as we can about that. In terms of remediation, what we've done is we've required everyone, all of our licensed producers to complete 52 hours of NAHU coursework. The tests are proctored, and that's whether they had any involvement in this or not. So we've just done it across the board. On an IT level, we've prevented iMacros from working on our network. So the underlying technology has been disabled. It could never happen again. And then I think the most important thing we've done is change the values and culture of the company. One of the first things I said on the first day that I became CEO is that we had to see what happened not just as a failure of technology or process. Those things are easily fixed and have already been fixed. But we had to see them as a failure of culture. And the culture had become one in which compliance just simply wasn't taken seriously enough. It was under-prioritized, and we had to change that. And one of the other things I said on my first day as CEO was that compliance was like oxygen. Without it, we die. As a company, we have to be in compliance. And so we've done a tremendous amount of work that all the employees of the company have to change the values and culture of the company. And it really is, I think today, a new Zenefits. It's a new company. And really what we've done over the last 7 to 8 months is refound Zenefits as a company that's rooted in compliance and gets this stuff right.
So in cancer terms, it would be the equivalent of chemo, radiation, and surgery, I guess, to sort of fix the cultural, the compliance, and maybe some of the actual day-to-day practices.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So the number one value of the company previously was, this has been well publicized, was ready, fire, aim. And that value was sort of institutionalized when the company was a young startup in an accelerator. And that kind of makes sense for a startup that's still at the phase where it's throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. It does not work for a large-scale business in a highly regulated industry. And so the company had just kind of outgrown that value. And so the value we have today is operating with integrity. It's our number one value. And one of the ways we do this is we have a program now called Core Value Awards. We recognize employees for living up to the values of the company. And there's a lot of examples of that. But I think the company's and the employees have done a great job making this transition to just, frankly, a more mature operating company.
The adolescence of Zenefits. So I think some of you may have encountered this. Some of you may do this today, where as a small, casual workplace, you make a sale, you take a shot. Is that truth, fiction, exaggerated? Is this?
You're talking about the alcohol shots?
Oh, yeah. The kegs and...
Well, I think that's probably a little bit...
and I swear we'll move on.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So so the company had a tradition in the early days of when a new, it wasn't for all sales, it was just when there was a new biggest sale, like kind of a new benchmark, that the company would take shots. And when it was still like 30 people in a room, that that was okay. When the company got to be hundreds or even like 1,000 people, it was like sort of bedlam. And so, I mean, I think the second week that I was CEO, I just simply banned alcohol in the office. I have nothing against people.
Probably a good idea.
I have nothing against people drinking on their own time, but we just didn't need that in the office anymore.
Jason, do we have any booze in the office? I don't think so.
This is one of these things where there's kind of a real cultural gap or divide between Silicon Valley and the rest of America, where the rest of America, when this announcement got some coverage, and the rest of America was kind of like, that's insane that you'd even have alcohol in the office to begin with. But in Silicon Valley, among startups, I can tell you it's like standard. So this is just one of those things that's a big cultural gap.
Among many, and so I think more than just the signage, there's a launch or a rebranding. Maybe I won't go so far as to say a reinvention, but October 18th, I wouldn't ask you to share all of it because you wouldn't, but you're wearing a shirt that has
no, I
Z2
know.
on it.
So I've been a walking billboard for Z2 for about 2 months. Unfortunately, I have more than one of these shirts.
Hot commodity.
Yeah, and there's a few other people here who are wearing Z2 shirts, so feel free to ask some questions about it. So Z2 really stands for three things. It refers to version 2 of the Zenefits product. So when you come out with a major new sort of reinvention or new version of your product, you call it a V2, we're calling this Z2, and it's going to be unveiled at our first user conference, which we're also calling Z2, which will be on October 18th in San Francisco. And then it also kind of alludes to this larger corporate reboot that we've been talking about culture and values. So Z2 is kind of the unveiling of the new Zenefits on a product level. But it also kind of refers to all the work that we've done over the past 6 months to reinvent the company.
Pardon my back to this side of the room. I don't mean to block you. Probably there's David over here, by the way. I guess maybe to the transition, when all of the change came, Parker exits and he resigned or was relieved? Does it matter?
Well, I don't know if it matters that much. I mean, I think there was a recognition that there needs to be a change.
And he holds no interest in the company. He's not a board member. He's not a shareholder.
Well, he's a shareholder, but he doesn't have any controlling interest in the company. Okay. He's not on the board. He has no control over the company.
So every employee through that transition was given what's been termed the offer. Zenefits has changed. We're a new company, new culture. You can either get with the new program or you can take a package, I guess. Right. How did that go? How many people?
I mean, it went very well. So what Michael's referring to is once we declared the new values of the company, the new culture, and the changes we're going to make, and brought in new leadership, a new board of directors, and made all these changes. We did say to the employees, look, this may not be the company that you joined. We understand that. We want to be realistic about that, respectful of that. If this is not what you signed up for, that's okay. And we gave everyone a 2-month voluntary severance package if they wanted it. They got 4 months of COBRA, and 10% of the employees chose to leave. 90% of them chose to stay and re-enlist in the new Zenefits. And we thought that was, tremendous validation by the employees of the new direction.
So that's about 140 employees,
roughly? We had about 100 people take the offer, and yeah.
Okay. And the general gist of that is that they didn't come to work for a traditional insurance company, or?
Well,
why did they leave?
Why they leave? Well, they could have left for any number of reasons, but I guess. We had made a lot of changes, and if it just wasn't what they signed up for, then we didn't interrogate anybody about why they were leaving. We just gave them the option, and what I wanted to make sure of is that nobody was at the company just because they were afraid they wouldn't be able to pay their rent or something like that. We wanted to make sure that everyone was at the company believed in what we're doing, believed in the direction, and that they wanted to be there. And I think, to your point about traditional brokerage, there are a lot of things about traditional brokerages that we need to learn from and that we need to embody as well. But the company's still a hybrid. It's a hybrid between a traditional broker and a software development company, and that's something that we need to embrace, I think.
And that's a perfect segue. Actually, you didn't know this, but I was going that way. On the stage and in other conversations with Parker Conrad, we talked about the differences between traditional and Zenefits as a broker model. When we met a couple weeks ago in preparation for today, you shared something about you're not a broker, and there's a reason why you're not a broker. You want to share that here?
Well, so I'm a software executive, and I wouldn't want to demean the broker profession by trying to pretend that I was one, because, having been in this company now for a while, I understand how complicated health insurance is and what a valuable and important function brokers provide in terms of helping consumers navigate this bewildering array of choices. And so, I think that everyone at Zenefits now has a lot of respect for what brokers do and for the ways they help consumers, and that's why we're investing so much in broker education. This is why we're doing the CAHU coursework, and we do a lot of ongoing education as well. We'd like our brokers to be as trained and knowledgeable as possible.
And I should add, so having completed, and this was at your own doing, they went through pre-licensing again, even if they already did it, and also went through our course. CAHU, the National Association of Health Underwriters, offers some coursework that helps for professional development. Rather than taking any other, you took ours. We should also add that we've got about 174 Zenefits employees who are members of the association. I think that number's right. I'm looking in Janet's general direction. I think that's about right.
I think, and so yeah, we want to play an active role in CAHU and the industry as a whole, and I think we all have a lot of things that unite us. I think we, and maybe the company hasn't been clear about this in the past, but we really believe in the importance of the broker function. As the industry faces regulatory challenges in the future, that certainly is we are on the side of understanding the value that brokers provide. We don't want anything to happen that would make the broker function go away. So I think there's a lot of things that unite us.
Maybe a different thread or different segue around valuation. So here in the Silicon Valley, it makes sense to many of us that valuation doesn't necessarily correlate with real revenue. There might be a clear correlation, but sometimes not. Was the $4.5 billion valuation overstated, inflated, or a product of a process that maybe you didn't agree with? If you had it to do over again, might there have been a different valuation set that wouldn't have caused it to be reduced?
Well, I guess my view on valuation is that it's the result of a process, and you run a process, and investors want to invest in the company, and as a result of that, a valuation arises. And I don't ever take a position on what the right valuation is. I think that's the result of a process. I think one of the things you're alluding to is that on the heels of our compliance cleanup, we also engaged our investors and reset our relationship with investors by striking a new deal with them. And it essentially repriced the financing round we did at a $2 billion valuation. And I think, again, for me, it's less about what the number is. It's more important that the company does the right thing. In my view, investors have a right to know, or they did have a right to know about the macro, and they weren't informed about that. I was an investor in the company. I certainly would have liked to have known about it before I invested. I never did. And so, in my view, that was something that we had to make right with the investors, and that's what we did.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was a $12.5 million personal investment, and everyone but you you were the only one diluted in that?
Well, so in order to give the investors a better deal, somebody has to get diluted, and so I was diluted the same as the common shareholders. And again, I just thought that was the right thing to do for the company. Along with that, though, we did give all of the employees more options, more stock options, so that their ownership would not be diluted. Because I didn't think it was fair if that this would fall on them.
I'm zipping through some notes, some things I'd rather talk about now than later. So we had you coined a term that I actually made me chuckle when we met a couple weeks ago. We described the market conditions and how much it's changed over the past year, and referred to, some of them are here in the room, but the ubiquity of technology for benefits brokers, referring to some of, I think affectionately or tongue-in-cheek, as arms dealers. 2 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of benefit technology for traditional brokers. Now it's everywhere. What are your thoughts of the market as it's changed related to technology for traditional brokers?
Yeah, well, I think whatever mistakes that Zenefits has made in the past, I think one thing that the company does deserve credit for is being the catalyst for this change in the market, where technology is now very much on the front burner and the forefront. And I know people are thinking about what sort of technology partners they're going to line up with. And I tend to think that's a good thing, but I come at this from the point of view of a technology executive, and I think that enhancing the client's experience by using technology can only be a good thing. Moving the industry from paper-based processes to online, I think, is a good thing. And I think Zenefits has been the catalyst for that. And I don't think we have to be the only one in the market doing this. I think it's a good thing that other startups have sprung up to provide brokers with the technology they need. And I think that's all that's all positive.
And I think that was generally Parker's take. I think he probably thought it would be a smaller audience or distribution of brokers that had it, and it might take more years for that to become so ubiquitous. So I don't know that that's changed any. I'm going to try and take some questions here as we go. Thanks, Lene. I'll read this one just as it's written. Most brokers see this business as an insurance sales and support business. You describe Zenefits as an all-in-one solution system that includes insurance. Are we seeing this business from the wrong, outdated perspective? Hope that pause didn't throw you. Are we moving away from it being a sales and service and maybe more transactional, maybe is the question. If anyone asked that question, you can re-ask it if I've messed it up. It was mailed in. Oh, you did, all right.
Are we seeing this as the way we see it from a customer service and support? We sell insurance, and you described it as we offer an all-in-one benefits package. Are we seeing this in an outdated mode?
Well, I guess the way we see what we're bringing to market is an all-in-one HR system that includes a solution for benefits as well as payroll and HR and HR compliance issues. So, and that's why I raised the idea earlier, which I'm still intrigued by, but we by no means figured it out. That is there a way for brokers to participate on our platform? I don't think we should be necessarily ruling that out. And the reason we can have that, we can be open to that position is precisely because we want to be a platform for small business HR, and it includes benefits, but it's not limited to that. And so I think in many ways, maybe the best way to understand the market position of this company is that it's a lot more like something like ADP than maybe people thought. I mean, ADP is sort of like the big traditional incumbent in the space. Zenefits is the startup disruptor, but I'm not sure that conceptually we're like that far away from what an ADP is doing. And so therefore, I don't know that brokers should view us as being inherently much more threatening than ADP, but just from a business model standpoint. I mean, obviously, I'd like to think that we do some things better than ADP, but yeah.
You're welcome to note those differences, I think, because there are other players like Gusto, namely Paychex, ADP.
Well, yeah, so obviously the big difference is that historically, Zenefits has not provided payroll services. We've integrated with payroll services. And at the beginning of this year, we launched our own payroll product in limited release. It's basically a closed beta. And you're going to see some announcements around that at Z2. So there's going to be some news around that. And I think, I mean, I don't want to totally spill the beans, but I think that over time, I think the lines between what we're doing and what some of these payroll companies are doing are going to first become blurry, and then they're going to disappear.
With HR or payroll being the lead, or benefits? Where does benefits fall in terms of the degree of focus or priority? I mean, this room might be heavily biased in, obviously, in the area of benefits, but from your company strategy and perspective, are you a technology company first, broker second, HR first? What's the hierarchy?
Well, the tricky thing is we really do have to do all those things. And I mean, this is the challenge of bringing an all-in-one system to the market. So if you look at something, a product like ADP, they do kind of provide everything, but the pieces don't really talk to each other that well. And you know, some of the pieces were acquired by acquisition. They've never been fully integrated. And then it's not open in terms of APIs the way that a modern technology platform should be. And so, you know, our challenge is we have to build our technology in a modern way. We have to provide broker services that are excellent, and we can't afford to kind of say that these things aren't, that one of these things isn't the priority. I mean, that's our model.
Have the relationships with the carriers changed? And from that, I'll give it from two perspectives. One, the day-to-day business relationship and how business arrives to the carrier, and secondarily related to the licensing and regulation. So you get through the regulatory investigation, they deem that there was some violation and it deserves a fine of X. But second to that, I suppose, is possibly some reaction from carriers. Any?
Well, certainly we've talked to them about it. I mean, our strategy with regard to all the compliance issues has just been to be as forthright and transparent about what went wrong, to fix it as quickly as possible, and then try and move forward. And we've done that with the carriers, just like we've done it with the regulators. I think the carriers in general understand that regulatory compliance is up to the regulators to enforce, and I think that their view is to let the regulators decide what the appropriate response is. And I think as long as the regulators forgive us, I think the carriers will as well. And so far what we've seen, it may forgive isn't the right word, but what we've seen is that 6 states, you know, DOIs have allowed us to move forward, and I think you're going to see many others do the same thing.
Any idea, maybe speculation, around why California is taking so long? I think other complaints or other state filings were done around the same time or even after, and have since been resolved. Any idea why California is still?
Well, they're our lead regulator, and so they're conducting a very thorough investigation, and you know, the whole macro issue was a California-specific issue, and so they have a little bit more to investigate there. But you know, I'm hopeful that'll be resolved soon.
Okay. Moving into maybe more broad questions, finally. What is your general take? I mean, the term disruptive innovation may be overused. Everything's being disrupted. I think it's probably moved away from its original, maybe more academic definition. You know, Clayton Christensen coined the term in '95 and had a really specific definition for what it means. Is it overused? Is everything disruptable? Is that maybe just a local thing?
It's definitely more of a local thing than, you know, it's probably a word you hear in Silicon Valley a lot more than you hear in other places. You know, disruption is probably overused in the sense that, you know, a lot of new technology is really creating new markets and new products and new things that didn't exist before, and making people's lives better in new ways. And it's not always about breaking down something that existed in the past. And so, and I think actually that's what most of technology is. And so I guess I have a more sort of positive outlook on what technology is than just kind of like destroying old things.
Well, you maybe look through a different lens and look for disruptible things. I guess in the space of health insurance and health care, we're probably one of the more obvious disruptible targets. What do you see coming next in terms of disruption in either insurance or healthcare?
Well, in healthcare, you're seeing a lot of activity in terms of new companies get venture financing, and it's going to take years to see how. I mean, it's really a wave of companies that have been financed in healthcare, and you know, like most startups, most of those companies aren't going to be successful, but you'll see some that really do invent new things, and I think healthcare is a sector where we could definitely use more innovation.
Do you think the VC community is becoming a little more specialized, meaning taking less risk in market segments like insurance or healthcare where they may not have that domain expertise? It seemed like there were, a few years ago, a lot more big gambles being made without necessarily as much, I'm projecting here, right. Without as much industry expertise. So lots of people wanting to disrupt insurance without having a thorough understanding of how insurance works, how highly regulated it is. Stop me anytime.
Well, no, I mean, so I think one of the things that's happened in the last several years is that Silicon Valley is investing in more companies that that are outside of the. They use software or they innovate on software, but their industry is not traditional. They're not traditional software industries, and I think Uber is kind of the paradigm for this. That's a company that's in the transportation space. When it was first, I think one of the things about saying that Silicon Valley doesn't do big things anymore, which is certainly one of the complaints, is that all the big things really start small. And so Uber started as essentially an alternative to taxis, and I remember when it first started, and actually I was an investor in it because I used it and I really loved it. But I remember people critiquing it, saying that how big can this company get, because it's just a substitute for town cars and on demand, and so they would do things like look at the market cap of Carey, which is the big town car company, and they would say that it's not a very exciting company. And so a lot of these things have to start small, and then they gain steam, and then they become more interesting and more profound over time.
Do you have insurance folks on your board, or is there any? So I could imagine that if you're trying to disrupt an industry, the last thing you want to do is have some old school insurance folks on your board, or is that wrong?
Well, no. So we have an advisory board that consists of, it's called the Zenefits Insurance Advisory Board, and we have a couple of the folks here, and they do provide. They've got something like a collective, I don't know, I think like 100 years of insurance experience between them, and so we do rely on them to help us with our moves in the insurance space.
And maybe I'm projecting a little bit, and I hesitate to even mention the name, but I think there's fair or unfair comparisons with Theranos, and a bigger, I think, if you want to call it, scandal around compliance, or I don't know how else to frame that. Yeah. Do those comparisons come up often? And I would imagine you would consider those to be totally unfair and unrelated comparisons with Zenefits. Well,
I think at this point it only comes up as a contrast, meaning that Zenefits, our approach to remediating a situation is sort of a 180-degree opposite of what they and other people have done. And in the sense that we've just been, again, we self-reported these problems, we fixed them, and we've moved on. And so I think at this point it's primarily a contrast. I mean, the other very big difference between us and a company like Theranos is I think they're still struggling to bring a product to market, and I don't think they have a product in the market, and that's not Zenefits, obviously.
I think, and inviting other questions to come in, we're getting a few cards that are, and I'm getting the 10-minute sign that I'm supposed to steal second. Not sure what she said. I'm a 10? What? Well, thank you. But, some general questions around the future. Where's the company going, to the extent that you can reveal? I think October 18th will probably be the big kickoff. But is there anything moving into workers' comp, property casualty? I think there was some discussion that you thought that the smaller group space made better sense given your model than moving upstream into the larger groups. Is any of that still directionally true?
Well, I mean, so one of the things that we declared when I came in as CEO was that we were going to focus on small businesses, not necessarily just small group, but small businesses, which I would define as being kind of companies with dozens of employees as opposed to hundreds of employees. And so that's still very much the focus for us. I think what you'll see at Z2, and I always want to spill the beans in forums like this, but I shouldn't.
It's just us. We won't tell anyone.
Let's just say I think we're very intrigued with the idea of an app store. Obviously the most important computing platform and technology today is the computer that's in your pocket, your phone, and I think we're going to take a lot of lessons from that, and you're going to see a whole new design for Zenefits. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. There's going to be a whole bunch of new functionality, and it's going to there's going to be some strong analogies to what you see on your iPhone.
Any movement into individual, senior market, international?
I don't think so.
Yeah, keep true to what works and the market.
Yeah, because remember that what Zenefits is trying to do is provide an HR solution for small businesses and small business owners and their HR people. And so when you start getting into the individual market, that's really out of focus for us. What's really important is to provide a solution for small businesses.
What do you find the biggest challenges? And I'll make up in my own mind that there might be a challenge of you moving faster than the insurance carriers can in terms of EDI, in terms of being able to go totally paperless. Right. Are those?
Well, it would be wonderful if all the insurance carriers had modern APIs like a Google or something that we could integrate with, and all of you could integrate with, and that would be
we want
great.
It to.
Yes, so that would be amazing. Clearly that's the end state for this industry, is that everything is done through electronically, and so we're waiting for that day, kind of just like you are. But in the meantime, we'll do the best we can with whatever options they provide.
So as inspiration, there's lots of very creative folks and lots of entrepreneurs here in the Valley, but at your level of achievement, who do you look to for inspiration? Or as we started this discussion, you're already a member of a very elite group, the PayPal Mafia, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. Who do you look to for inspiration or for motivation?
So I was lucky to work with both Peter and Elon, and get to work with them when they were CEOs, and I feel like I learned a lot from them, and I do look to them for inspiration. Another person I look to in business would be someone like Warren Buffett. I know not a tech guy, but he's somebody I respect a lot, and so there's folks like that as well.
I think, and maybe we started the conversation with a very open but cautious question of, I'm going to that question now. Given what you've heard in terms of, well, actually, I should let you ask it.
Do it.
It's not my question. All right, well, I'll give my, on this stage, I asked Parker Conrad if he was, or maybe it was why, maybe not an if, but a why you wouldn't consider partnering with brokers. And he very clear, without a moment's hesitation, said that his model, he tried it, did a couple of pilots with a couple brokers, one north, one south in California, and it didn't work out. He added to that selling insurance is different than selling software. So he sort of described it as a chasm that says, well, I might have considered it if it were possible, but I tried it, and you guys, I'm paraphrasing, you guys can't sell software. So that was his reason and explanation. Fast forward a year and a half later, how many of you would consider, if Zenefits were open to a partnership model, how many of you would consider working with them? Show of hands. By my unscientific count, they are unmoved. So I think what's missing is what's the revenue split? What are the terms? Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
But maybe we should ask, how many folks in this room are currently exploring technology solutions that are Zenefits like in some way? So, like, okay. More people.
Maybe the better question is, how many of you are already there? Okay.
There's carriers in
Yeah. Yeah, in fairness, we've got a mixed audience. Some are vendors, carriers, general agents, and so on. So I think, and it feels like a quarter of it are Zenefits people already, so. I think we're at our time, but I'll let you have the last word and give you an opportunity to share whatever closing comments you'd like. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is your first time presenting to a group of your competitors?
I guess so, if you want to look at it that way. But I would just look at it as talking to the industry, and I think it's important. We're part of the industry. I think we have a very constructive role to play in the industry. We have a constructive role to play in CAHU and similar organizations, and so I don't really come into the room feeling that this is a room full of competitors. I think that there's a lot of common interests that we have. And there's a lot of room in this market for different approaches. So,
and in fairness, I would ask that same question if it were ADP or whoever else sitting here. So I think we're at our time. Just thank you again, David, for joining us, and please give him a round of applause.